Welcome back to Hands-on iOS Development. In this lecture, we're going to continue finalizing our home scene layout. And before we proceed further, I'm going to bring in the tab bar controller, and then we're going to make connection from the tab bar to the current home scene that we already have. So on the object library, I'm going to search for the tab bar, and we want to drag in the tab bar controller. So let me make some space for it. Then drag in the tab bar. Now let's zoom out. And I'm going to remove one of the default pages that's coming with this tab bar. So highlight on the controller that we want to delete. Then press delete. And I'm going to move this tab bar a bit to the left. So just highlight the controller that we want to move. Then we can drag in. And now, from the tab bar controller area, press Ctrl on your keyboard and then click and drag to the navigation controller. And select the relationship segue, the view controller. And it will automatically add the tab bar icon for the navigation controller. And then we want to move this initial view controller from the navigation to the tab bar controller. So highlight the tab bar controller, and then we want to check the box is initial view controller. And now the arrow move to the tab bar controller. So now we can continue designing our home layout. I'm going to zoom in. And then when we drag in the container view on the previous lecture, by default, the container view will have a view attached to its container. And we will not use this default view controller, but instead we're going to bring in the page view controller. So we can click on this controller and remove it. And now we're going to start laying out the detail about the label, the size of the collection view to finalize our design. So first, I'm going to bring in a label. So let's search for a label in the object library and drag in the label. I'm going to place it underneath the container view. And then I want to name this label just by double click it. Featured toys. Then let's set some auto layout right now. And I'm going to set 15 points from the top and 15 points from the left. And also for the height, I'm going to set this to 30 points and add constraint. And now we can do update frame. And now the next thing, we want to set the layout for the collection view. So let's first set the size of this collection view. So highlight the collection view, and then we're going to add the constraint. And I want to set the 0 to the left and the height to be 170. And then add to constraint. Now we want to have the labels to be a bit overlap to the collection view area. So instead of setting the vertical spacing to the label, I'm going to set the vertical spacing from the collection view. So click and drag to the container view and then select vertical spacing. And then once we got this constraint, just click to highlight it. And I want to set the constant to 30 points. And then press enter. And then the next thing, let me zoom out a bit. In the final product, we have a static view on the first collection view row. So we want to set the width proportional to the device size. So in order to do that, if you remember from the previous lecture on the auto layout, so highlight the collection view So let me expand this a bit. So this is the collection view in focus. Let me rename this to toy collection view. And then we do control, click, and drag to the content view. And then we want to select equal width. And then once we got the equal width, let's open the size inspector. So make sure that the collection view is still being highlighted. And then select the size inspector. We want to scroll down. On the equal width, I want to select edit. And I want to set the width to be just 2/3 the device width. So that's how big the collection view is for the first one. And we can just do update frame. So the yellow area will be the size of the collection view. And then we want to add the view, the static view, on the right side of it. So let's bring in a UI view. And then drag beside the collection view. And just expand a bit. And let's add some auto layout for this view. So add constraints. And now I want to set the trailing to be 0. And then the leading to be 0 to the collection, toy collection. And then the height to be 170, which is equal to the height of the collection view itself. And then add 3 constraints. And then we want to add some additional constraint for this. So drag from the view area to the collection view. And then we want to select baseline. And then update frame. And now let's take a look real quick at the constraint that we just created. So the baseline will guarantee that the bottom part of the view will align with the bottom part of the collection view. So when you mouse over, you can see that this constraint is being highlighted. And then the leading is 0. The height will be equal to the height of the collection view. And then the trailing space is against the content view. And now the next thing, we want to add an image view. And then we're going to drag in to inside the view that we have. Now we can add the constraint. And I just want to set 8 points all around. And then add 4 constraints. And then update frame. So we got the first row of the collection view, the layout done. And then now the next thing, I want to create a separator between the first collection view and the second collection view. And to create a line separator, we can just use the UI view. So let me bring in a UI view. And then we want to drag in just about between the first and the second collection view. And then we can just resize it. Then I want to resize as well to the left and to the right. Then let's give a background to this view. So open the attribute inspector. And then I want to give the background to a light gray. So that's our view right now. The next thing, we want to set some auto layout. So add the new constraint. And I want to set its 5 points to the toy collection view. And 15 from the left and 15 from the right. And I want to set the height to be just 1 point. And then add 4 constraints. Then we can just do update frame. So that's our line separator between the first collection view and the second collection view. Now let's line up the second collection view. Actually, before we do that, we want to create the second label first. So let's bring the label and drag in to about below the line separator. And let me zoom in. Now we want to rename this to DVD collection. I want to set the auto layout between this DVD collection and the featured toys. I want the label to be left aligned. So we can just press Control and then click from the DVD collection to the featured toys label. And then we want to set leading, meaning they're going to start from the same spacing. And the advantage of using it this way instead of the DVD collection have a horizontal spacing to the super view. If we need to move one of the label, the other will move as well instead of moving independently. And then the next thing, we want to set the vertical spacing between the label and the line separator. Actually, let me highlight this line separator. It's probably easier from the document outline. Let's find out. So this is the line separator. I'm going to rename this to line separator. And then to create the constraint between the label and the line separator, we can just do it from the document outline. So click on the DVD collection, then Control click and drag to the line separator. And then we want to select the vertical spacing. And once we got the vertical spacing, let me zoom in. That small line over there. So highlight that, and we want to set that to 8. Then press Enter. So now we got the auto layout set for the DVD collection label. Now let's work on the collection view. So now let's zoom back out. So similar to the first collection view, we also want to set the height to be 170. However, instead of setting the 170 explicitly through the add constraint, we want to set the height to be equal to each other. So click and drag from the second collection view to the first one. And then we're going to select equal heights. So by doing it this way, if any of them change the height, the other will follow instead of setting up in 2 places. And then the next thing, we want to set the constraint for this collection view against the leading and the trailing. So we can add the constraint, and it's going to be 0 and 0, and add to constraint. The next thing, we want to set the constraint between this collection view and the DVD collection. And similar to what we did on the first label and the first collection view, I want the collection view and the label to be a bit overlapping. So let's click and drag from the second collection view to the label and select vertical spacing. And then let me zoom in. Now this tiny blue line here is the vertical constraint. So click that vertical constraint, and I want to set this to be -15. And then we can just do update frame. So now there is a bit of overlap on the label for each of the collection view. And to avoid confusion, I'm going to rename this collection view into a DVD collection view. All right. So now we are ready to start designing our cell. So let's start with the first collection view. So actually, let's click on the toy collection view in the document outline. And then we want to open the size inspector. And now we're going to set the cell size. And I'm going to set this cell size to 130 width and 130 height. And then the lines with 30 points. So this will determine at least the spacing between the cell is 30 points. And then for the top, I want to set to 20, bottom to 20, and left to 30, and right to 10. Okay, so now that's the skeleton of our collection view cell. And now inside of this collection view, we want to get an image view. So let's search for an image and then drag in to be inside the cell. And then we will set the constraint. And I want to be 0 all around. And then add for constraints. And then do update frame. Now we're going to do the same thing with the second collection view. So highlight the DVD collection view. And then we want to set this to 130, 130, and then minimum spacing for cell is 0, and then for line is 30, and then the top is 20, bottom 20, left 30, and right 10. And again, we want to bring in an image view, and then set the constraint. And this is going to be also 0 all around, and add for constraint. Then the update frame. All right, so now I'm going to give this app a test. I'm going to run this. So we will not see the collection view yet because we haven't set the data source for this collection view. And now this is our app. And actually the home scene right now it's set on the first item, but the first item, because we add the home scene by first deleting the default view controller, the home scene is now being placed on the second item. And we're going to change the placement a bit later. But when we tap this second tab, we can see that right now we have a space for the page view controller at the top, and our first collection view, and the second one. And the scrolling actually works, the scroll view. So later on when we have the image, we can see that the image is at the top, and then we can scroll, and we get some space left at the bottom, which is what we want. So let's change the placement of our tab bar controller before we move further. So back to the storyboard, and then on the tab bar controller, let me zoom out first and click on this item, the first tab, and then move it to the other side. Now it changed place. So if we run this again, the first scene that we see should be the home scene layout right now. So this is now become the initial scene. And on the next lecture, we're going to start laying out the page view controller. And we're going to set the page view controller to slide in from the right to the left with a timer that will slide for like every 3 seconds or every 5 seconds.